The best way to start a discussion of caste and race is to introduce one of the central concepts in the study of ethnicity. And basically, if you go through that literature, then conceptually societies, or certainly some relationships between racial ethnic groups, can be divided into two kinds of orders: ranked social order and unranked social order. A ranked social order is sometimes called a vertical social order, and unranked social order is called horizontal social order. And it's essentially this distinction is about how ethnicity, race, or caste on the one hand, and class on the other might be connected. And class, recall that ethnicity, race, or caste are ascriptive terms, primarily birth-based. And class is a term which is economically or occupationally defined. And we have a horizontal or unranked social order when an ethnic or racial group, it could be religious group also, or caste, is more or less randomly distributed over the upper, middle, and lower economic classes. This is more or less random distribution. Now, this particular order, unranked social order, is different from what is the main topic of discussion today. And that is a ranked or vertical social order, where ethnicity or race or caste on the one hand and class on the other coincide. There's an overlap. In such systems, ethnic groups, racial groups, caste groups are occupationally confined. Interoccupational mobility is prohibited by custom or coercion. Some groups are ranked higher, called superordinate, and others are ranked lower, called subordinate. The best examples, so the classic examples of ranked social orders are racial slavery in the United States and also Jim Crow after that. As you know, it's not simply racial slavery, so that's the origin of it. But even during the so-called Jim Crow period, 1890 roughly to 1965, and we are discussing that today. Apartheid system of South Africa is another example, and caste system of India. There are basically 5 caste groupings. There are 3 upper castes: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. An estimated 16% of India are the 3 upper castes. Brahmins were traditionally scholars and priests. Kshatriyas were traditionally warriors. And Vaishyas were traditionally businessmen. These are the 3 upper castes. Then there were middle or lower castes: Shudras, peasants and artisans. It's the untouchables, scavengers, waste cleaners, alcohol makers. It's the untouchables who were at the bottom of this hierarchy, and it's the untouchables, now ex-untouchable. Untouchability was abolished. They're also called Dalits. So you can see that the occupation, the caste was not only a hierarchical system, but each caste had a dominant occupation. Caste groupings are not racial. Even though there was endogamy, that you could not marry, that is to say, you could not marry across caste, but this is not a racial restriction. So how do you know someone's caste? You know, and of course they can tell you what it is, but the bigger the city, the harder it is for you to know who is traveling next to you in a subway, in a bus. In order for you to know someone's caste very clearly, you will either have to be from the same village or you will have to know the name. So race can be recognized all over America, and arguably because it's written, inscribed on your face, in the color of the skin, etc. The race has much greater recognition. So that's one big difference. Affirmative action policies were also constitutionally enshrined as early as 1950. India developed an affirmative action regime, and it has become bigger over time. The chairman of the Constitution Drafting Committee was India's leading Dalit intellectual of the time, and also perhaps the most educated, this is very interesting to note, the most highly educated politician of the time. Imagine Du Bois as one of the architects of the US Constitution, were he alive in 1780. It's something like that. The Indian political leadership decided it was not enough to say sorry to the ex-untouchables for centuries and centuries of atrocious treatment. So the constitutional moment was very different when symbolically it became very important to make the leading Dalit politician the head of the constitution drafting committee. And he had to come up with laws and constitutional clauses which would embody the idea of Dalit empowerment. How would Dalits be empowered had to be thought through and put in the legal and constitutional codes. Affirmative action policies as a result were born, and the first set of affirmative action policies were about political representation. Since Dalits were 16.6, roughly 17% of the population, 17% of state assemblies and national parliament all had reserved slots for Dalits. Second part of affirmative action was that they would also have the same proportion in civil service. So the administrative service, which had a lot of power, and the police had the same proportion by law. So in other words, in positions of power, a certain proportion of power by law was reserved for Dalits. And later on, this was also extended to institutes of higher education. Ambedkar, as the framer of the constitution, you couldn't rely on their change of heart to give greater dignity to give greater representation to the Dalits. You will have to do it by law. And on political power, you can see it follows from this, that the idea was that you will have to combine law with power. A fusion of law and power is the way to address deep-rooted, centuries-long inequalities